So, maybe running into like some scorching issue if you're roasting too hot. But I mean, we're pretty much maxed out on capacity there as far as like per batch. Like
Wow.
we're running the stated capacity that the roaster said. So, if you went lower, then you would run into some issues with like going too fast through a roast or whatnot. So
I guess the main difference with this being that if you screw up with this roaster, you screw up a lot more.
yeah, I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars per batch.
That's crazy.
Welcome to the Coffee Experts Club, where we discuss all of the insights, expertise, and drama that goes into making your passion your profession. Our hosts, Aaron, Ben, and Drew, are three coffee experts who have taken their coffee experience and turned it into true expertise. They have consulted with major coffee brands throughout the United States and beyond, providing operations expertise and growth strategy for drive-through openings, multiple locations, and everything in between. So brew yourself a cup and hang out a bit with the Coffee Experts Club.
Well, welcome all to Coffee Experts Club. Everybody that is about to be watching and everybody that may watch in the future. Today, we have the illustrious Cody Anderson with us. Cody, since you are a special guest of honor for the day on this wonderful Coffee Experts Club, give us a quick synopsis, who you are, what makes you important, if anything. And I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe to some people I might be, but I don't know.
But no, like what you're doing in the industry now, what you've done in the past, quick resume.
Yeah. So started out with Roasters Coffee and Resilient Coffee Roasters. I don't know, it was 2014. I did roasting with them for probably 6-7 years with the roasters. Also did a lot of maintenance on espresso machines, in the shops, installs, stuff like that. And then currently I just moved to Vancouver, Washington with BlackRock, and I am a lead roaster there now. So they just had some movement and changes, and now I'm lead roaster there and kind of been working on quality control for, their coffees, making sure we keep the blends consistent. And so, yeah, that's kind of a lot of roasting experience, a lot of quality control, and it's on the espresso machine and chops.
Nice. My first question, what's the poundage difference you were roasting with roasters and like now with BlackRock? Like what were you roasting with roasters and now, like how much have you leveled up in just the amount of coffee you're roasting?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, I would say like we were doing probably like 2,000 pounds a week at roasters, and we do that in a day at BlackRock. Like at Resilient, when we had our 30 kilo, we were doing 60-pound batches. Now we're doing 240-pound batches on a 120 kilo roaster. So
Holy moly.
it's a lot more for sure. But it's weird because it's just, all the roasting is pretty much the exact same time, if not faster, on a bigger roaster. And so it really doesn't feel like we're doing much. It's just a little bit more bagging, because you're bagging all of that coffee that comes out. But other than that, it doesn't feel like a lot more. It's just like the production of that, per batch is just triple.
It's a huge amount of coffee.
When you're roasting that much more volume, is it a more sensitive process? You have to be a little bit more careful.
Not necessarily, with a bigger roaster, you are, adding more heat to it. It is a lot bigger of an oven pretty much. So you do have to kind of watch, they're actually made to be able to push that much coffee. So, maybe running into like some scorching issue if you're roasting too hot. But I mean, we're pretty much maxed out on capacity there as far as like per batch. Like
Wow.
we're running the stated capacity that the roaster said. So, if you went lower, then you would run into some issues with like going too fast through a roast or whatnot. So, but
I guess the main difference with this being that if you screw up with this roaster, you screw up a lot more.
yeah, I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars per batch.
That's crazy.
Versus, a lot less on a 60-pound batch, which is still
Mm.
a lot.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So do they have their suppliers and their farms pretty much set in stone, or are you doing any sort of like communication with the farmers and trying to get new coffee in, or is it pretty much all locked in at this point?
They have it pretty much locked in. I've been trying to kind of help out with that a little bit from things that I have experience with, but it sounds like they have a very good relationship with the importer. They pretty much have been with them since day one. And so they actually, at least from my understanding, I've talked about it a little bit with my higher ups, but it sounds like they kind of trust the importer to kind of guide them through decision making of beans, of coffee. So, they're not doing a lot of it themselves, really. I mean, they are making kind of financial decisions, but as far as like quality of coffee or origin types or, substitutions for blends, they kind of trust their guy to give them advice, which that's common too. Sometimes people, they're the buyers of coffee, they know their coffee's the best. So, them giving you advice on this is going to go well in this blend or whatever, or, you're running out of this is going to be a better substitution. Like, they trust them to do that. So,
So these are the guys who are actually at the farms and saying like, hey, like you just said, like if you're running low on Brazilian, we don't have Brazilian from this specific farm. And here's another farm I know really well that we purchased from that they recommend pretty much.
yeah, they're pretty much the buyers of coffee. They go to the farms, different farms, and they buy containers or lots of, whatever coffees they want. And then they can then sell those to their customers. And it's kind of like a brokerage, they buy their coffees and then they can, push them out to whatever people need them. So
Interesting. So say I'm, a new coffee shop owner, starting a new coffee company. What would you say are the pros and cons of, trying to getting your feet wet into roasting your own coffee? Because I mean, obvious ones is cash, right? You roast your own coffee, that's more cash in your pocket. But more from like a roaster standpoint, from somebody like you who actually is doing the roasting, what's like the main difficult thing hurdle you have to get over, and then what's like some other pros that new coffee shop owners might not know?
well, I mean, I think, one of the big things is obviously it's a cash investment. So, you need a facility, you need a roaster, you need a stock of coffee up front. It's not just a, $5,000. Okay, I can start roasting. You need some cash to put up to get this thing started. But the beauty of that is you start making your money back very quickly especially if you're buying coffee from a roaster or someone that, you're buying your coffee, you're not roasting your own. You'll probably see a lot of savings already from that just going in. What else? Downside, I mean, it's a little bit of work getting everything set up. So, working with vendors, specifically importers, getting a roaster set up, you need a company to come in, get all your utilities, all of your coffees from the importer. There's steps that just a quick process. And then it goes with learning and developing your profile. That's also going to be something that it's not that big of a learning curve, but to get good, it is. But I think, most people can get a solid product, within the first week of them roasting, like something that's, going to be good in the shop. And then you tweak as you go. I mean, that's kind of how we started too is, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, to be honest. And I just was throwing coffee in and then tasting it. And over time, you kind of get better at, tasting and making adjustments. So, the pros obviously is just, your markup on coffee is a lot better, and your quality control and your control over your product is all in your hands, which, if you're buying coffee from someone else, they change the blend or they can't get the coffees or whatever it is, then your product suffers or changes. And then you have to tweak everything in your shop. So any advice on like how to be self-taught, like where to learn this stuff from? Yeah. So YouTube, I mean, there's some great guys on YouTube, Mill City Roasters. They have like a whole roasters class, like playlist that you can go through. There's like, 15 to 20 videos or something. And these guys are very intelligent. Like they'll break down the chemistry behind roasting. I mean, I would say that's a little bit more advanced, but even learning that from the get go, like you're still going to learn stuff. Read a lot of books. Scott Rao is a good one. He has like a beginner's roasting guide that kind of goes through everything from green coffee to roasting types, pretty much the whole shebang. So just, a lot of books, a lot of YouTube. And then the best thing is just being the one roasting. That's the best, data you can get is your own feedback from the coffees you roast. So even if that's getting a small roaster if you don't want to make that big jump right now, getting like a little sample roaster or even something like a 1 pound, just where you could start testing and, tinkering a little bit. That's also going to help you a lot too. They're not cheap either, $5,000-$7,000 for like a 1 pounder. So it's not like a cheap investment, but compared to like 30, 40, $60,000, it's a little bit more doable. But yeah, the best way is just getting in there and roasting coffee.
How do we feel about like used roasters? I mean, I know we've, done the refurbished machines in the past. That's a really good way to get off the ground if you're, starting a coffee company to serve drinks. But when it comes to roasting, would you recommend going with a used machine, or is it something like if you want to do it right, get a brand new machine right out the gate?
Well, I haven't had any experience with used machines, so I'm not gonna like say yes or no, but I think there's definitely a market for that. And if you get something like an old Probat, like these are machines that are meant to be, workhorses for years. I would recommend going through someone that like knows what they're doing, like a company that's like recently upgraded, that like had good maintenance schedule, had a good, like a legit company, not just some, guy roasting out of his garage. Maybe like that might be a little bit more sketchy to buy a reused roaster from. But if you can find one from like a legit company that had, good services, like you maybe service records from, people coming in and cleaning them out, or yeah, I would say like maybe sticking with something like that. But I don't have any experience with, luckily with used roasters. Everything has been brand new that I've hopped on, except this BlackRock ones, but they were pretty much brand new for them. So it's not like, a used machine from someone I've done.
Yeah.
So,
Party. Interesting. Have you, at least in your roasting over the last couple of years, have you noticed, I'm curious, like any weird trends that have gone on in the coffee industry, specific, like the import, export, and distribution industry side of things? Like, with COVID, for example, like, did you guys run into any sort of supply issues where you're like, oh no, we're out of coffee and you have to like pivot really hard to something else? Like, have you ran into any of those issues over the last couple of years?
yeah, I mean, pretty much COVID with the ports, like that really screws up distribution. If you're waiting on a shipping container and ports are getting striked, or, just in general, they're backed up. I mean, you can have coffee sitting for months, and then you have to kind of buy spot, which spot is pretty much coffees that these importers have in their warehouses that you can nab up, but usually not paying a good price. I mean, it's a good price, but it's not locked in for like a full forward contract is what that would be considered if you got a contract through a importer. But also, even if you are doing a forward contract, that shipping container that you've already purchased, in a sense, is still waiting in the port. So really anything shipping overseas is, especially in times like, COVID, what we had and how backed up all the ports were, it's going to be rough, and being able to pivot and going with maybe a different importer or someone that has like, you kind of just got to scramble around and say, who's got coffee that we can have. So that is
seeing issues like that, or does it seem like it's clear enough?
with specific origins. Yes. Ethiopian right now they've got a civil war going on, and also just ports in general they're seat in. They had a
Civil war.
yeah. They also, their crop was kind of like low this last year. So mixed with that and a civil war going on in Ethiopia, it's been really hard to get that origin. So we're running out. We know our importer is like scrambling to kind of find extra stuff. So usually, I mean, that's something that you have issues with origin specifically sometimes, if they have a drought or if they have, something, a low crop season, then everyone's, still wanting that coffee. It starts to become kind of hard to find. And then also then you see prices with, the supply and demand of that. Prices start coming up a lot. So you do see that. We are seeing that kind of right now, specifically with Ethiopian. But, some of the bigger exporters, like Brazil and stuff, it's been pretty fine.
Always relying on Brazil.
Yep. They produce a lot of coffee.
If I'm looking to get into roasting now, what would be a piece of advice? Like, first thing I should do out the gate, like say I'm again that brand new, I've got maybe 2-3 locations and I'm like, I need to start roasting because I'm just paying, too much for wholesale beans, what would you say is the first thing I should do, out the gate? First major thing that should be on my list of to-dos if I want to get a roasting company off the ground.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest, starting with lining up where you're going to roast. That's going to, are you going to have to invest in maybe like a warehouse, or can you do it, maybe out of one of your shops, or are you building a new shop that can hold a roaster? Because that's what we did. So finding first kind of a location or an idea of what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be roasting. Then I would kind of go through your volume of how much you're going through, because to see what size of roaster you're going to get, because you all kind of want to be in the middle of having a little bit room to play, or else you're going to be roasting literally all day.
Yeah.
So you don't, if you're going to hire someone to do that, maybe that's what you want to do, is have them just work full time. Or if it's yourself and you're the owner and you don't really want to roast, full time, then you get a bigger roaster, or if that maybe in the future, you're going to be opening up another 5-6 locations. So, you're going to plan for growth, but I would go through your volume and kind of decide on a roaster size. Then from there, it's pretty much, finding importers, finding people that can work with you, probably buying spot from, for the first year or so until you can develop some good relationships with people and try different people out. I think that's something that we kind of didn't do in the beginning, is we just went with one because it was easy, which I love the importers we worked with, but I think that there was better options out there, or even options just to have as backup. Or, I would recommend going with a couple different importers and seeing, who's willing to work with you more and kind of give you the better deals.
Yeah.
And from there, then just, you get all the products going, you just start roasting stuff. And I feel like that's kind of how I would do it if I was starting a roastery right now.
Smart. I didn't even think about figuring out how much coffee you're using to figure out what size of the machine you have. That's a good thing I didn't start a roasting company. I never would have thought of that. Well, it makes total sense though. You're not going to want like a 300-pound, or what it's in kilos, right? Machine, if you're only putting out X amount of coffee, you don't want to overkill it. But at the same time, that's really smart though, leaving room for growth.
Yep.
Because ideally, if you're starting roasting at like a company of 3 shops, you're starting it so you can have some capital to open a few more shops.
Well, that, and what we did even was we had a little bit of room to grow with the roaster, and we actually picked up wholesale accounts. So we started a wholesale side of things, which can add, depending on if you have a lot of coffee shops in your location. We did churches, we did libraries, it's like small little things, but you can easily add another 100 to 200 to 300 pounds per week just in that alone. So, I think it's always better to go a little bit above what you need for growth, because you can add more roasting. Easier to add roasting than to be like, crap, I need to add more time on the roaster to produce more coffee.
And once you do all that work to get that roaster set up, to then just have to pull it out and replace it a couple years later with a bigger roaster, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a lot to do too, because you got to hire somebody to come in and remove that thing, pipe in a new one. That's smart.
I was kind of curious about your experience, and, you've done a lot of retail, but also with wholesale and maybe getting clients, and you guys do any white labeling or anything like that?
Yeah. So with BlackRock, we're not really doing any of that. We do retail through by some people that order through the online store. We still do that. As far as wholesale goes, we don't do anything for that. But with roasters or resilient, we kind of, actually, there was a lot of like natural business. Like there was a lot of people that are coming by like, hey, do you guys sell bulk coffee at a wholesale price? Like it wasn't really that we like pushed that in the beginning. It was kind of just happened. But then once it happened, then it was a little bit more of like, okay, well, we could get in here, or we could, maybe if there's a coffee shop that comes by, we could talk to them about, maybe them using our coffee. So, but yeah, if I was going to do it again, I would go around with samples and I would just give them to little shops and say, this is our coffee. We can even maybe, if you're willing to do like a different blend for them, or make them feel special by doing a special blend. Yeah, I would kind of go around that way and, try to get clients picked up that way. But I feel like it was actually pretty easy once people were, tasting your coffee, especially if you have a good reputation for good coffee, then it's even easier that people are just nabbing you up left and right. So
As a new coffee shop opening up and I'm looking for a, distributor, somebody to buy my coffee beans from, what would be a good area for pricing, like a range that I want to be sitting within so that I, know I'm getting good product, but that I'm also not paying too much for my product?
Good question.
yeah, that's a good one. I would say anywhere between $5 to $9 per pound. I mean, that's, not being too cheap, anything under like $4 or $5, I would kind of start to question the quality of the coffee, just because if you're able to charge that, then you must be getting it pretty cheap. And, usually cheaper coffees is lower quality, but it kind of just depends what you're looking for. Obviously around the $9 range, you're going to be looking at more premium stuff, but I would say stick between like $4 to $9 a pound. And then I would really just test it, like see if you can take a big sample and run some espresso shots through and taste it. And then maybe, asking kind of about the origins, what their blend is like, is it going to be consistent? That would be another thing. Like, is it going to be the same coffees? Are they going to change origins on us randomly? Those are the things that I would kind of look at for, using a wholesaler.
When you are looking at distributors, say, for example, we use Atlas at Roasters and we use Coffee Shop too. What do you look for when you're, courting a potential distributor, somebody who you want to work with? Do you look at, maybe the size of their operation or how consistent they are with their export or imports? I guess I'm not exporting anything, but what are some key things that you look at if you're deciding, okay, I want to go with this distributor or this distributor?
Well, I would say a couple things. There is some importers that specifically do just one origin. I think a lot more are kind of now going towards, usually maybe if they're like a newer importer, they might stick with one specific origin. I think a lot more now are kind of going towards getting multiple origins, but I knew of some, back a couple of years ago that mainly just did Guatemalan coffees. But for a new coffee roaster or someone that's new, I would probably try to find someone that has a variety of origins. That way you're not limited to just one. And then, you can get your entire blend from that importer. Also just, values, if that's important to you, like if they're sourcing their coffees like fair trade, or if they're being like sustainable, things like that. Like if that's important to you, then, there's a lot of companies that focus on that more. And, you may pay more of a premium for those. Usually any organic coffee and stuff like that, you're going to be paying a little bit more premium. But if that's important to you, then that's something that, you can look around for. And there are importers that really just specialize in that. And, maybe even small lot, like you're not really wanting to go to commercial coffee where it's just big, farms owned by corporations. You want to go more towards the small farmer lots that like are family owned. And so like, it just kind of depends what you're looking for and what your values are as a company. Then I would choose that. But to start, just pick something like an importer that has all the origins that you maybe want for a blend, one-stop shop. And then maybe if you need substitutions of things, you can go to another importer for like one coffee or like one origin, but not like, this importer for this coffee and this, then that's a lot more to handle. It made it a lot easier. And then if we had to do substitutions for different origins, then we just, hop over to one other importer and they usually have that. So it made it a lot easier.
Well, Cody, thank you for joining us today. This has been really informative, actually. I'm hoping that somebody who's looking to get into roasting gets some good information, because I wouldn't know where to start. If I was looking to start a roasting company, I'd be like, what do I do? If there's any questions, even email us and we can pass messages along and get you in contact with people if they're looking for even like some roasting support.
For sure.
Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who are looking to become a coffee expert yourself, we offer an incredible, thorough training online for opening your first coffee drive-thru at www.myfirstdrivethru.coffee.